I wanted to put this video out there to document my experience with a leaky travel trailer roof. I bought this about 6 months ago. It is my first travel trailer, and to be honest, I didn't know what I was doing when I bought it. When the winter thawed out, I was up on the roof up there and realized that there was a spongy spot right around the batwing antenna. I'll go up there in a sec, but I went out on YouTube and I saw a handful of videos describing how to pull back the membrane. A lot of the other leaks that I saw were in an upper corner, and so it was easy to do that. But my travel trailer is about 31 feet long on the roof, and the antenna is right at a midpoint, and I didn't think that was feasible. So I just wanted to show you another approach that I hope works as well to keep the rubber roof intact and repair this from beneath. So I'm now up on the roof, and you can see a temporary patch that I've put in place over the hole where the antenna was. Removing the antenna was fairly easy. There are other videos out there on YouTube that will show you how to do that. But basically, the entire antenna, the seal, everything was completely rotted, and all of this surrounding area was spongy. So heading into the trailer now, as you can see, I've removed essentially 2 ceiling panels. I found a supplier locally who could get me the entire panels, and so I figured it would be better than just cutting a portion out and adding an extra seam. And right there you can see the culprit. This was the perforation in the membrane for the antenna, and it leaked over to there. You can still see a little bit of discoloration over there, up and around, and then again a little bit of discoloration over there. These 2 outer sides are still structurally sound, and so what I've decided to do was cut these out to the point where the structure is still good, and then I'm going to replace this with the same thickness OSB. In my case it's 7/16, and then in each of these 3 rafter cavities I hope to scab on to either side to pin that up into place. A couple things to mention about this process, which I can't show you. First thing you're going to need to do is remove all the little trim pieces around the exterior edge, and then I used a tool like this. I used a bigger blade, I think it's right here, small reciprocating saw, to essentially cut the edges, because it appears as though they built this from the bottom up, and as best I can tell, this is actually the ceiling panel, and it's pinned under the framing, so it's tucked up and under. I'm not going to be able to get that out. So what I did was I went along the edge over here, found a rafter, and I'm going to cut that to the middle of the rafter so I can join the new panel on that rafter. Went around and cut all of that out. This was incredibly rotten around here, so it was fairly easy. I could pull it out by hand and then worked it back, cut it back. What I've done is I've pulled out the OSB above the rafters. Okay, so a few hours later, and I've done a few things. As you can see, I've painted all of the wood that was exposed to the water with bin primer to hopefully cover up any odor and mold and anything like that and seal it up. I've cut 5 pieces of OSB paneling. There are 3 primary panels here, and then what I've done is tucked up a small piece that rests right on top of the 2 ceiling rafters. So I've pulled the panels out just because I need to do a little bit of work on them. You can see the smaller pieces are the pieces that sit on top of the roof rafters. On the lower edge, that presses against the rubber membrane toward the outside. I'll sand it down to try to get a curved edge so that it's not a sharp 90-degree right there pressing against the rubber membrane from the inside. This is all upside down. I know it's a little tricky to see. I'll be using the PL adhesive to glue wood to wood, because when those smaller pieces are in there, they kind of want to bend up. They're not conforming to the curve of the roof. And then the other thing that I have, the other product, is this Dicor product that was given to me by a local RV supply store. They actually had a quarter can open. So normally this is pretty expensive. I got it cheap. From what I've been told, the type of adhesive that you use on the rubber membrane is very important. Has to be water-based, otherwise bad things will happen to your membrane, your roof. And so they said apply it just like you would contact cement. So here's the finished product. As you can see, the ceiling panels of OSB are in place. I've got the 6 scabs up in place and drilled a couple holes in it just for airflow. And the biggest thing that I had challenges with are that, I don't know if you can see it, but the rafters and the scabs have a slight curve to them. So what was happening when we put them in, both this end and especially this end, were popping up. You could actually feel the corners and the edges poking through the rubber membrane. So the most critical piece of this was actually these pieces here. Couple thoughts. I had to do it with somebody up on the roof. They were stepping down holding the seams together as I drilled up and sucked these up. And I learned really quickly that the size of the screw has to be precise. I actually poked up and through once. I put the PL construction adhesive, a ton of it on there, because I don't want that to shift in any way. But I'm pleased with the outcome. So it does stick up a little bit there, but it's not terribly visible. I can't see it from the ground. I can feel it. But it's incredibly stable. So at this point, I just picked up the ceiling panels. I'm going to insulate, and we're going to throw the panels up. One last thing to show you before I button this up are these little grooves I cut into the back. I didn't want to get into rewiring this, and I didn't think this would really compromise the structure at all. So I cut those grooves for the larger groove in the back for the large bundle, and then that little slit for this single wire which is associated with the air conditioner. So as you can see, we're mostly there. First piece was not that difficult. Tucked it up and over the cabinet, created guide holes, and then, as I mentioned, I just took a Dremel with a rotozip bit, cut that out, measured for the speaker holes. We just tucked this panel up and in. It was a bear, largely because this cabinet is built in place, and the ceiling rafters were literally pushing down on it without the ceiling panel there. So it actually took 3 people, 2 feeding it and 1 pushing up on the ceiling rafter. I have yet to cut out these 3 holes, but I'm going to rotozip them, and then all around the edges I'll put the trim back up and in. So here you can see the original perforation and the green of the OSB. You can see that there's a little bit of a ripple around the edge, but not bad at all. And honestly, this is probably now the strongest part of the roof. I'm going to clean that up and throw down some Eternabond. I've started doing the Eternabond around all of my perforations. The stuff is awesome. And here you have the Eternabond seal. Here is the finished product. I took a brad nailer and tacked up the trim on the seams and all the edges. In a few places I used a little bit of caulk to hide some of the gaps, but in general it looks like new. I hope that helps.